What? There's another Times Square launching? How many projects are there anyway? Hey everyone, Marielle here, property consultant and investment advisor in Cambodia. If you've been researching about the Cambodian property market, I'm sure you've come across a lot of Times Square development projects. Yes, it can get confusing. Different numbers, different locations, different pricing. So instead of asking which Times Square project is the best, the smarter question is which Times Square project best aligns to your investment strategy and future plan. In this video, I'm gonna walk you through the different projects by district. And each district, we're gonna be talking about the location profile, the typical tenant type, the realistic rental expectations, and what type of investor each one is best suited for. Because in Phnom Penh, returns are mostly driven by district economics. So if you're comparing all those Times Square projects now, this video will help you evaluate them properly. There's a lot to discuss, so let's start. First, BKK1 or Bang Keng Kang. It is the city's most established expat and embassy district. It is a true mixed-use neighborhood of residential, commercial, diplomatic, and lifestyle all in one area. It is also where the developer Mega Kim World started their very first project, Times Square 1. In a strategic perspective, that decision actually makes sense because if a developer plans long-term expansion, starting in the city's most competitive and most visible district will help them understand the tenant behavior, pricing benchmarks, and market expectations at the highest level. Today, BKK1 remains one of the most resilient rental markets in Phnom Penh. The area is highly walkable, surrounded by both local and international cafes, restaurants, offices, embassies, and NGOs. You're near Independence Monument, public parks, Aeon Mall, and within minutes of the Royal Palace area. That combination of infrastructure and accessibility is what protects rental demand here. Tenants in BKK1 are typically NGO professionals, corporate locals and expats, business owner, embassy staff. They choose this area because it minimizes the commute time and maximizes convenience. For many of them, location outweighs price sensitivity. Rental ranges are generally higher here than in purely residential zones, and vacancy risk tends to be lower, especially with those buildings that have very good property management. We're looking at $700 to $800 for one bedroom, $1,000 to $1,200 for two bedrooms, and $1,400 and up for bigger units. For investors, BKK1 supports balanced strategy. Stronger tenant demand, higher rental stability, better resale liquidity. One of the reasons why Times Square attracts attention here is because they position themselves as comparatively accessible entry pricing within one of the city's most expensive neighborhoods. So for investors, that combination of core location with mid-market entry pricing is what creates long-term attractiveness. In this district, Times Square has expanded significantly. Times Square 1 established the brand presence. Times Square 5 has recently completed handover last December 2025. Times Square 6 is under construction and already fully sold out. Topping off ceremony will be this March 2026 and handover timeline will be in the Q2 of 2027. And Times Square 9 was recently launched at the start of the year, reflecting continued developer confidence in the district. And to top it all off, just 2 months after launching, we're looking at more than 50% sold out. Starting prices here for one bedroom is only $88,000 and the handover timeline will be by the Q4 of 2029. Meanwhile, Kork is one of Phnom Penh's most established residential districts. Compared to BKK1, it is less commercial and more community-oriented. The roads are noticeably wider, the streets are quieter, and the district has two very distinct faces. One side with larger villa-style homes and long-standing residential properties, and another side that reflects more local neighborhood character. This gives the area a more grounded, residential feel rather than a high-density urban environment. Tenants here are typically local professionals, teachers from international schools, long-term expats, family. They prioritize space, accessibility to schools and supermarket, and calmer surroundings over nightlife and walkability to commercial hubs. Because of that, the tenant turnover tends to be a little lower than that of the commercial and lifestyle districts. Rental pricing in Toul Kork generally sits in the mid-market segment depending on the unit size and furnishing. Typical ranges are $400 to $500 for one bedroom, $700 to $800 for two bedroom, and $1,000 and above for larger units. For investors, Toul Kork suits strategy based on stable occupancy, predictable rental income, long-term holding. It is also worth noting that Toul Kork sits slightly farther from the new international airport compared to southern districts. For tenants whose work or lifestyle is centered in central Phnom Penh, this usually has minimal impact. However, for investors specifically targeting airport link or logistics-driven tenants, location alignment should be considered. Times Square 2 and Times Square 3 were developed in this district and were handed over during the COVID period. From an investor perspective, that is significant. During a time when many regional developers delayed construction or paused projects entirely, these buildings proceeded to completion and handover. That signals execution reliability, which matters when evaluating developer track record. Currently, Times Square 7 is under construction in the same district with handover expected Q3 of 2028. They are down to their last 10 units remaining with price now at around $83,000. Entry pricing tend to be positioned lower than BKK1, making it more accessible for investors entering Phnom Penh at a moderate budget level. Toul Tom Poung, or also known as Russian Market, has evolved to be one of Phnom Penh's most community-driven residential districts. Unlike BKK1, which is anchored by embassies and corporate offices, Toul Tom Poung is shaped by independent businesses, boutique cafes, co-working spaces, and a strong entrepreneurial presence. The neighborhood is still predominantly local in character. You'll see many traditional kamay houses, low-rise service apartments, and buildings typically under 10 floors. Compared to BKK1, there are fewer high-rise towers and fewer full-facility condominiums. Tenants in Toul Tom Poung are usually digital professionals, remote workers, creatives, small business owners, long-stay expats. They prefer neighborhood atmosphere rather than corporate district. Many choose to stay here because it offers lifestyle vibrancy at a much more lower rental compared to BKK1, while still being only a few minutes away. Rental pricing in Toul Tom Poung generally falls within $400 to $500 for one bedroom, $700 to $800 for two bedroom, $1,000 for larger configurations. Older buildings and traditional houses can rent lower depending on the condition. Because BKK1 is directly adjacent, tenants who cannot justify paying the BKK1 rental prices tend to move one straight over to Toul Tom Poung and secure a unit there instead. This budget spillover effect supports consistent demand in this district. From an investor perspective, Toul Tom Poung is for mid-budget entry strategies, investors targeting digital and lifestyle tenants, buyers seeking consistent occupancy rather than corporate tenancy. The strength of the neighborhood comes from the popularity, not embassy infrastructure. This creates a different kind of demand, more community-driven, less institutional. Times Square 8 is the first Times Square residential series in this area. It represents one of the few full-facility condominium developments in this largely low-rise neighborhood. From a market standpoint, introducing a high-rise condo product into an area dominated by low-rise stock can create rental premium potential, provided that pricing remains aligned with tenant budget. As of the making of this video, they are down to their last units remaining. The duplex-style units on the high floor, starting price now around $150,000. And since we're midway through this breakdown, I want to highlight something very important from the pricing perspective. Toul Kork, which sits north of BKK1, and Toul Tom Poung, which sits south of BKK1, often operate within very similar rental ranges. Even though the tenant profiles are different, pricing converges. Why? Because both districts sits just outside the BKK1 premium core. They function as what I would call buffer markets around BKK1. Now let's move southwest This is Sihanoukville. It is where the first coastal project among the Times Square residential series is located, Times Square 10. Sihanoukville is Cambodia's largest coastal province. It has its own international airport, a deep sea port, multiple special economic zones where manufacturing and logistic companies operate, and of course, direct access to the coastline. The completion of the Phnom Penh Sihanoukville Expressway has also reduced the travel time to under 3 hours, significantly improving accessibility between the capital city of Phnom Penh and the coastal area. It's also important to acknowledge that Sihanoukville went through a volatile phase. The focus today is shifting more towards structured development, logistics, manufacturing, tourism quality, and long-term infrastructure planning. Unlike Phnom Penh, which is driven primarily by urban, residential, and corporate demand, Sihanoukville operates in a different logic. Here, you can see short-term holiday renters, lifestyle buyers, investors looking for second homes or holiday homes, noticeable big Asian community, and locals and expats working in special economic zones and port-related industry. There is also a growing accommodation tied to hotels and infrastructure employment and industrial expansion. Rental performance in Sihanoukville operates directly from Phnom Penh. Demand here is still selective and quality-driven, and not all buildings perform equally. Projects with strong property management, property maintenance, and consistent upkeep tend to outperform significantly compared to poorly managed stock. In terms of market ranges, one-bedroom units typically rent between $500 to $800, two-bedroom units $900 to $1,200, and three-bedroom units and larger can command $1,400 and above. Beachfront views can command a premium, but only when pricing remains realistic and aligned with tenant expectations. For investors, coastal market is often good for those who are comfortable with tourism-driven fluctuations, interested in long-term infrastructure growth, and diversifying beyond purely urban rental plays. It is also often viewed as a long-term positioning play tied to Cambodia's port expansion, logistic growth, and coastal tourism development. And at the end of the day, most coastal areas are often slow at the start, and then a continued increase for demand in the future. And now let's move to BKK3. BKK3 sits directly adjacent to BKK1, meaning geographically it benefits from proximity to the core area without fully carrying the premium price. Compared to BKK1, BKK3 is slightly less dense, less commercialized, and more transitional in character. This is also the area where a popular tourist spot is located, Toul Tom Genocide Museum. Every now and then, you can see groups of tourists visiting the place. You'll find a mix of older residential homes, mid-rise apartments, and more local boutique shops. This gives BKK3 what I would describe as an evolving identity, positioned between established prime and emerging growth. Tenants in BKK3 are typically a mix of young local and foreigner professionals, corporate employees, NGO staff, long-stay expats. They choose this district because it allows them to remain within walking distance or short commuting distance to BKK1, but at a more moderate rental level. This attracts tenants that value centrality but still remain price conscious. And now, the most exciting part has come. The launching of Times Square 11 this month. This is the newest addition to the developer's portfolio, and you guessed it right, it's in BKK3. And this is where it becomes interesting. After successfully delivering projects in BKK1, Kork, Toul Tom Poung, and even expanding to Sihanoukville, the developer is once again focusing on central Phnom Penh, not moving outward but strengthening their footprint in near-core districts. That decision alone tells us something. It shows continued confidence in central demand. BKK3 operates within the same rental band as Kork and Toul Tom Poung. $400 to $500 for one-bedroom units, $700 to $800 for two-bedroom units, and $1,000 and up for larger units. But unlike older stock in the area, Times Square 11 will bring modern layout efficiency, full condominium facilities, professional property management structure, and a brand recognition from previous successful projects. This creates differentiation in a district that is still largely composed of low-rise apartments and smaller buildings. And that differentiation matters when competing for tenants. From an investment perspective, Times Square 11 offers entry into a prime adjacent district, pricing below BKK1 core benchmarks, exposure to continued central Phnom Penh growth, and a developer with proven completion track record. With a starting price of only around $50,000 range, it will surely attract strong early interest from buying location proximity without paying full prime premiums. So there you have it, all your Times Square projects from the first to the latest one. BKK1 with Times Square 1, Times Square 5, Times Square 6, and Times Square 9. Toul Kork with Times Square 2, Times Square 3, and Times Square 7. Toul Tom Poung with Times Square 8, Sihanoukville with Times Square 10, and now BKK3 with Times Square 11. When evaluating Times Square projects, the real question isn't which building is the newest. It is which district aligns with your capital strategy, risk tolerance, and investment timeline. Location drives demand, pricing drives occupancy, and strategy drives performance. And if you're still comparing projects in Phnom Penh, Siem Reap, or Sihanoukville and want a clear, number-based breakdown that is tailored to your goals, just message me. I just don't sell projects, I help investors evaluate their decisions, and that makes all the difference. Thank you for watching!